Today we're going to talk about the number one cryptocurrency in the world, Bitcoin, and what's so exciting about Bitcoin even today. Every year people say Bitcoin can't go any higher. They didn't think it was going to go so high in 2020. They thought that it's all going to be over, but Bitcoin is only getting started. We're going to talk about what Bitcoin is, how it works, how you can buy Bitcoin, the pros and cons, and everything else you need to know. So if you're interested in learning more about cryptocurrency, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. So first up, what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin was the first ever created cryptocurrency, and it was created differently than all fiat currencies because it runs digitally on computers. How do they make Bitcoin secure? To put this as simply as possible, they run the Bitcoin blockchain on a lot of computers at the same time, and all the computers have to agree about the transactions to make sure there's not duplicated money, right? You can't just edit some code and say, oh, I have a lot more Bitcoin, because all the other computers will say, no, you don't have that. And that's why they have to, quote unquote, mine Bitcoin, because they have to have all these computers working to figure out if these transactions actually existed or not. That is a little different than when Bitcoin is first created and what the real definition of mining is. Mining is when you solve very complicated problems to earn the reward. And because you did the work to solve this complicated problem, you get some Bitcoin as the reward. But also, if you're working to process these transactions, that is also like mining, it's hashing, and you should get a reward for helping to keep Bitcoin secure. And so that's basically, in the simplest way possible, how cryptocurrency stays secure and why it's crypto instead of fiat. Because fiat is all run in computers by banks. They have large banks of computers, data centers, or at least all these servers, right? And those servers are storing information about how much money is out there with the bank. And the bank has to keep 5 or 6 copies of this to make sure, and there's no way that they lose this information, say that the power went down or something. But with cryptocurrency, if everyone turned off their computers, you couldn't trade it, but the ledger wouldn't be lost because it's already been recorded. As soon as some people turn their computers back on, the computers are talking to each other, and everyone agrees about how much Bitcoin exists out there, and you don't need this large central data center with all of these records. It's all shared and distributed, which is why they call it decentralized finance. So who created Bitcoin? Back in 2008, during the financial recession, the Great Recession, this shadowy figure, Satoshi Nakamoto, released it as a open source computer program. And the guy probably doesn't actually exist. In the crypto community, they believe that it's a group of people now. But, you know, the mystique and mysteriousness of Satoshi is part of what's so interesting about this. And when he published the original open source code that allowed people to start mining and creating this cryptocurrency for the first time ever, there was a line in the code which was the newspaper cover from when the Great Recession happened. And so the point to this computer program was to recreate finance entirely, to change the financial system from something that's controlled by a few people to something that's in the hands of everybody, much more anarchy, much more controlled by the masses instead of just rich people controlling it. Now it's obviously evolved a lot since then, but that was the original concept, to put the power back in the hands of the people. And it's open source, which means that anyone could take that and rewrite it, change it, edit it. They call this a fork when they create another cryptocurrency off of the original Bitcoin open source. But because it's open source, everyone can play with it, everyone knows what it is, and we can all agree about it, which is part of what's so interesting about Bitcoin. So you might be wondering now, why is Bitcoin so expensive? Well, when it was first created, it was valueless. It was just something that you could make, like I said, with this open source computer code. And the only people mining it in the beginning were real nerds who thought it was cool. And at one point, they had something called Satoshi dice, and you could roll dice and trade Bitcoin this way, and it was more of just like a thought experiment, like for fun at that point. But eventually people realized that you could transact this, and so they started using it, especially on the internet, to send money places that maybe they couldn't before. And while it has been used for a lot of black market activities, now it's moving into the mainstream because more people believe in the value behind it, and that use has been accepted by people. So why is it so valuable today? Because we all believe it's so valuable. Like any currency, it's only as valuable as we think it is. And that's one of the reasons why Bitcoin will stay so valuable, because it already has been so valuable. People believe in Bitcoin, but there's a lot of cryptocurrencies you've never heard of before. How are you supposed to believe in that when you don't even understand the brand? So definitely, I think, without giving any financial advice, definitely no financial advice, but Bitcoin's got a future, and you're only going to see in the long run the price to continue to go up because Bitcoin means something to people. So now that you understand why it's so valuable and how it works, basically, let's talk about the pros and cons of Bitcoin. The big pros are that no one can stop you from sending a Bitcoin transaction. Your bank can't stop you, the government can't stop you. If you have Bitcoin and someone has a wallet that accepts Bitcoin, you can send it to them and nothing can stop that. The bad side of that is that if you send the Bitcoin to the wrong address, there's no way to get it back. And if you don't trust that person, or that person is a scammer who tricks you, you've lost your money and there's no way that you can possibly get the product or service that you paid for after they pay you. The good thing about Bitcoin being decentralized and all of these transactions being possible is that I can send money right now and I don't have to get approved by a bank. I don't have to KYC verify, which means know your customer, provide an ID or something like that. If I have a wallet and they send me the Bitcoin, I have it, it's my Bitcoin, and no one can tell me as a person if I can or can't trade it, like I said before, which is really helpful for people, let's say, in dictator regimes or who live in countries where they don't really have good bank infrastructure. So that's the big use case for Bitcoin. The transactions are kind of expensive. If you only wanted to pay for a cup of coffee and you wanted to send the Bitcoin, you should pay $1.90 right now, I think is around what it is. Last time I sent Bitcoin, it was about $1.80. So it doesn't make sense for these small transactions, but for large transactions, the fee is the same, right? And if I'm sending thousands of dollars, it's much cheaper with Bitcoin than if I was going to use PayPal, which would charge me 2.9% roughly. So that's the pro and con at the same time of the price of cryptocurrency. Now, all of that said, it varies depending on the way that you pay. If you use an exchange to send it, they have a fee for sending the Bitcoin off of the exchange because they don't want you to do that. If you have it decentrally in a wallet like Trust Wallet or Atomic Wallet, MetaMask, Math Wallet, then no one can tell you, no one is charging you. You pay the network for processing your transaction. So all the people who are running the computers to make it possible, they get a small amount of that transaction. And that's why these fees are important, and they're not going anywhere. But at the same time, the fees are reasonable as long as you understand them before you send it. Make sure you don't have to pay fees to a platform or someone else. And so now the biggest question you might have is, where can I buy Bitcoin, or where should I buy Bitcoin? And it varies depending on where you live, because certain companies don't operate in certain countries, maybe because they have regulations, or it's illegal, or they're afraid to process transactions. And if you only have a credit card, debit card, or a bank account and you want to get Bitcoin, you have to sign up for a centralized exchange or use some service that will accept your fiat and send you Bitcoin. It's always more expensive to pay with a debit card or credit card on almost every exchange out there or service. Simplex, for example, is a service that integrates with a lot of decentralized exchanges, and you can put your credit card, you can use your credit card to pay in Simplex, but you're going to pay 3 or 4% on your Bitcoin transaction. An account on a centralized exchange like Coinbase or Binance, you can link a bank account and use ACH or SEPA transfer if you're in the EU to pay for your cryptocurrency, and that will be much cheaper. Usually there's no fees associated with that. The cheapest exchanges to use are Binance and Kraken, because they only charge around 0.25% per transaction that you make on your side as the taker, because you're buying. You pay the taker fees, it's about 0.25%. If you use Coinbase, it's about 0.5% per transaction, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're trading, those fees really add up quickly. So I would recommend everyone, if they can, to use Binance. You can't use it, sadly, in Hawaii, New York, Texas, and the US version isn't as great. There's other countries they don't operate in as well. But if you're able to use Binance, Binance is the best. If you can't use Binance and you're in the US, I would recommend you use Kraken. They didn't sponsor these videos. It's based solely on the fees structure and how easy it is to set up with those platforms. I particularly like Kraken because their customer service is good, and it was really easy and clear to set up an account. So after you create that account, you might be wondering, where should I put my Bitcoin? Is it safe on the platform? And while those platforms are very secure and have good trust ratings because they have good IT infrastructure, it's still possible that they could get hacked by some outside hacker and your cryptocurrency could be stolen. They say that this is theoretically impossible, but the safest way for you to hold your Bitcoin is to move it from those platforms into a wallet like I was talking about earlier. The best wallets are Trust Wallet, which I use personally, or MetaMask, Math Wallet, Atomic Wallet. Make sure your wallet supports the cryptocurrency that you're sending it, and make sure the address you send it to is good for that cryptocurrency. If you send Bitcoin to an Ethereum address, for example, you'll lose your Bitcoin and you won't be able to get it back. But once you have it in a wallet outside of the platform, it's much, much harder for hackers to get your cryptocurrency, and it's much safer. I hope that this video helped you and you learned something from it. If you have any questions, definitely DM me in the comments. I'd love to help you learn more about cryptocurrency, and maybe I'll get some ideas for some other videos. Have a great day. Bye.